Hello and welcome back, most illustrious members of the Detail. I'm your host D, also known as MTF Doom, and today I have 3 decks for the upcoming new release Nebula. I hope you enjoy. Just before we get into it, as always, a shout out to all my benefactors, everyone who subscribes, everyone who joins the Discord. If you want to be among the illustrious who do so, it's very easy. You have to click a button or follow a Discord link. It's all down below. You know what to do. It's not your first day on the internet. You are not a baby. I appreciate everyone who supports, and we're going to get into it. So the upcoming release. Oh, you know what? Actually, we should still probably have this up. Okay, it's the upcoming release, Nebula. 1/1 type character. I don't know what that's. Okay, it's a card. What oh, it could be a location. Okay, I'm a fucking goon. All right, so it's a 1/1. Each turn, your opponent doesn't play a card here, gets +2 power. This doesn't trigger the turn you play it. So it's the anti-Guardian of the Galaxy effect. Guardians get plus power if you play them in the same lane that an opponent plays a card in that turn. This is the opposite. So it incentivizes your opponent playing cards into this lane, or else Nebula grows. That being said, so it won't trigger on 1. So supposing you play Nebula on 1. It won't trigger on 1 because it doesn't trigger the turn you play it. Then they can play a card on 2, 3, 4, and 5. And then not 6. So this is, if you play this on 1, it's kind of guaranteed to be a 1/3, which is fine. Like, usually 1/3s have slight downsides that you have to play around, like 0 and Blade. But we're going to do better than that. That's the goal. We're going to do better than that. So that's what we're doing to try to make this card good. And here are the decks. We'll start with, they're just 1, 2, and 3, because I didn't want to spoil what the actual gameplay mechanics of the decks were. So, first deck is Clog. So, this is, I think, maybe the most obvious choice. Well, that's not true. I think the most obvious choice is that there's going to be a lot of people playing Guardians of the Galaxy cards, because your opponent is incentivized to play into the Nebula lane, or she'll win it on her own, right? She's like, what, 11 power. If your opponent doesn't play anything to the Nebula lane ever, she's like 11 power, right? Because it's gonna trigger 5 times in her base, so she's a 1/11. Now that's not gonna happen because your opponent's naturally gonna play some cards to some lanes at some point, but we're gonna try to limit that with this deck. So it's the regular package of, you know, Viper, Goblin, Debris, Titania. The empty slot is obviously Nebula, and then the cards we want to donate with Viper are like Hood. We don't really mind donating any of our like little cards. Like Debris itself is a fine donate. Armor is fine because we just want this ongoing effect, but we prefer the Hood or a Rock as our donate target. We have Armor because we don't want them to eat anything that we donate, especially in the Goblin lane. We got Polaris to, 1, we can just move rocks around and make a lane more cluttered than they're intending. But 2, it lets us pull Titania in certain situations from one lane over to the Polaris lane and then have it jump back to us. And because we're filling everything up, we got Mojo, who is just a 2/8 and a pet favorite card of mine. In general, Mojo and Carnage are a non-bow, but I really like them together in this one particular instance. And then to round it out, sometimes you just want a big threat that can also, like, either, in general, Magneto really isn't moving much a lot of the times because the lanes are so clogged. But if you have a weird set of cards come up where, like, oh, we, like, didn't get a lot of, like, Debris stuff happening, or we didn't, you know, we only saw Goblin but not Viper or Debris, something like that, then being able to pull Goblin from the lane that you put it in over to the Magneto lane is really big, especially if you're like going Nebula on 1, following it up at some point with Goblin, and now your opponent like abandons that lane because they're like, okay, like my opponent has now committed like 4 energy worth of stuff, and I'm probably not going to be able to outdo it because they've used up one of my slots already. So Nebula's going to get out of hand, and I have to overcome this -3. So they might just give up on the lane, and then you can take advantage of that by using Magneto to pull Goblin out of that lane. So now Nebula has won that lane on her own, and Goblin has been useful because Magneto now counts as like 15 power because Goblin moved over to the lane he's in. So I think this is going to be a really strong contender. It's also just like, if you've been following the tournament arc that's going on in our Discord, best manga, the DKRO Discord. This has just been a really popular strategy because we're all, as described by one Discord user, we're all fucking goblins. So we're all just trying to, like, you know, throw rocks at each other for a whole tournament. It's been fun. So I think this one's basically fan service for my Discord, but I also think it's going to be a really good deck. All right, then we got deck number 2. This is a location control. No spoilers, but if you saw yesterday's video, this deck is pretty good. The point of this one is just to, I mean, we're going to see Goblin a lot. Goblin's just good with what we're doing. I think you're going to have to play armor in a lot of these decks simply because there's going to be a lot of Killmonger going around. In the same way that when Hitmonkey came out this month, Sandman was like huge. I think that Killmonger is going to be huge because Nebula came out, not because the Nebula decks are going to be the best, but because everyone's going to see Nebula everywhere and just be like, I'm fucking tired of this. I'm going to play Killmonger. So I think you have to play armor. Also, I have this sick Chibi variant, so I want to play armor. The whole point of this deck is it's just a Daredevil, Professor X, Spider-Man, Storm, location control deck. The point being, if you Nebula and then Storm, Nebula, now your opponent can't play anything on 5 or 6 because it's flooded. They can't play anything there. So Nebula gets +4, so Nebula counts as a 1/5 at bare ass minimum. But also if they didn't play anything there on 2, she's like a 1/7. Basically, she disincentivizes your opponent from trying to even win this. And even if they try to contest it, also she's resilient. By the way, Nebula is also resilient to the semi-common counterplay of Juggernaut into the Storm lane, which can really ruin your day. So she's resilient to that because she's already there. You don't have to play her on 4. You also have Spider-Man, which can lock someone out of possibly a lane they want to play something into to contest your Nebula on 6. In general, that's the other thing is you want to play Spider-Man on 5 anyway. So Spider-Man plus Nebula is a perfectly reasonable, like, yeah, Nebula is only a 1/3, but it's a guaranteed 1/3. Your opponent cannot play something into this lane because you Spider-Man'd alongside it. So if that's good enough, it's good enough, right? Like you kind of will know whether or not that's like a reasonable line of play, so you can make the best choice based on that. But and then we have Professor X, and it's like the same deal. It's only 1 turn of locking your opponent out, but it is possibly very important. And again, you can make these calls based on your own, you know, foresight. Like you have to get good at decks like this to play Professor X anyway. I mean, or you have to play Daredevil, which is what we're doing because I'm not good at this. And then to get into the locked out lane, we have Dr. Doom. So we still can interact, Dr. Doom and Mr. Fantastic. So this is also good. It gains some amount of percentage points anytime that, like, what's it called? Like Sanctum pops up, Luke's Bar, any of those hard to get into locations, you get some percentage points on your chance to win playing a deck like this. So it has those benefits as well. But that's it. This is a cool one. Again, it's already like a fairly good shell. I just think that the Nebula plays are gonna, like, it's gonna bring it up that little bit that it might need. And then the final one, the recently nerfed Sandman deck. So this one, basically, it's just another 1-drop, and if you're locking your opponent out of plays, it's a 1-drop that grows in the same vein as Sunspot, and you're gonna get into lanes with Doctor Doom, Claw, Captain Marvel anyway, so it just does not matter, like, that you might Ebony Maw or might only have Nebula somewhere, because your opponent has to either contest that Nebula and lose the other lanes, or give Nebula that lane, try to win off the back of like a 2-drop, right? But then you Sandman, and now they can't play a card into that lane every turn to stop Nebula from growing. And I think she's as good, maybe better. Like, you might be able to replace her with Sunspot, but in general, the top end of this deck is already really good. Like, if you can get Electro or Wave into a Sandman, you're in a really good spot because you have plenty of stuff to follow it up with. What this deck was lacking was other reasonable early gameplays, and so this, I think Nebula slots in really well to what this deck just wants to be doing. So that's it. Those are the 3 decks that I think I'm going to play around with when Nebula drops. Probably in the order I put them here. I think the Clog deck first and the Sandman deck last. But let me know what you think. What are you planning on playing? Are you excited about Nebula? Do you think she's like lackluster? You know, is she more a Nimrod or is she more a Silver Surfer? You know, let me know what you think down below. Join the Discord. Let's have these cool conversations. You know, it's so cool just hearing everyone's view and being able to talk about all this stuff. I get a lot of my best ideas for videos from the community, and I hope that doesn't stop anytime soon, because I make a lot of content and I need a lot of ideas, and y'all are really good at that. So I've been D. I hope you found this content elucidating, enlightening, or enriching. I hope you have a great day, and I will see you all tomorrow.